Hello, and welcome to the Game Audio Hour, episode 177. We're back. We're back with this weekly podcast where we discuss all things game audio, from creative ideas to the latest techniques, project experiences to audio secrets. Here is where you'll find in-depth coverage and opinions related to game audio. Hey, Chase. How are you doing there?
Hey, how's it going?
It's going okay. That sounds fun and festive.
It does. That would be the go home going crazy, which needs to be turned off, which I cannot do at the time.
Time for celebration. This is great. Oh. All right. Okay. Google has celebrated our return.
Yeah, thanks, Google. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Chase, what have you been up to?
Oh, well, I've been on a couple of guest panels. Went to Milwaukee to do one of those. Did a performance at Instantiated in October as well. I moved, so I'm back in Moore Park.
Oh, man.
Got a little studio now. Got a house. Yeah, just been up to a lot.
Oh, gosh. All right. Yeah, you've had a fun and exciting year, it seems.
Yeah, it's been a maelstrom, but a good one at times, and at times overwhelming.
Okay. Well, that's cool. Fun, sometimes overwhelming. That's all right. I'm looking forward to hearing more of that today and maybe even over the next few episodes. But before that, Mike, how are you doing?
I'm doing just great. It's good to be back and broadcasting or video vlog casting with two of my most esteemed colleagues. I think it's cool that we made it 20 seconds before the first audio glitch happened to the show. So what a fitting return to the Game Audio Hour.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Just like old times.
Just like old times. We're doing things a little bit differently. The video, as some of you might notice, looks a little bit differently. We're messing around with some different software. You can see we are now sponsored by Skype. Look at that logo. Look at that cool Skype logo everywhere. But yeah, after quite a few months of hiatus, not quite a year. It was close. Not quite a year. We are back, and there's a whole lot to talk about because games still going on, game audio still going on, our own lives going on with some crazy stuff over the last year. And it's been really fun. Now, maybe it would be appropriate to actually work our way backwards, considering there's been a lot of stuff recently that's been happening. And I actually got a chance to run into you, Chase, at Game SoundCon last week.
Yeah, that was really nice. Well, it was about like 6 or 7 in the morning, and we got some breakfast of champions.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about Wheaties.
Oh man!
But yeah, that was great. It was fun. I had a really good time. It was you, me, Sauron, and Ray, Joel, Ben, Hicks, the number 1 and number 2, and I think one other person. But yeah, it was a party. It was nice.
Yeah.
And then a lot of sessions.
Yeah. It was a little bit weird to me, honestly, this year at Game SoundCon. I had actually not gone to Game SoundCon in about 3 or 4 years or so. The last time I went, It was still over there at the LA Convention Center. So
really,
yeah. So it's been a while.
Wow.
I say the LA Convention Center. It's not like Game SoundCon was really significantly bigger a few years back. They used actually a very small part of the convention. Compared to the
upper floor
Biltmore Hotel, where it has its home now. But it was actually really interesting just seeing how different the whole thing felt, even though you had all the same people there. One of the things that I noticed is that the tracks are really quite different now. And I felt a little bit weirded out by some of them. Let's see. One thing that I thought was funny, or weird, or I'm not sure, but I just wanted to present this, is when I was going to Game SoundCon, you would have sort of a newbies and then professionals track, and then you would also have these technical tracks, which were an FMOD focused track and a WISE track. And this year, they didn't have FMOD, which I don't know about. I don't know how I feel about that, considering that all of the projects that I have worked on of recent are actually powered by FMOD. So seeing them lack representation at Game SoundCon felt a little bit weird to me. I mean, I know that WISE is the new hot stuff. It's really been the new hot stuff for such a long time now. But it felt a little bit strange seeing FMOD fade. Is this a beginning of sort of like a fade to obscurity? Are we all going to go on the WISE train now?
Two things. So at the con, I heard people say WISE. And the second thing is, what did show up? Fabric.
Wait, say that again?
2. Fabric 2 came out.
Oh, yeah, Fabric 2.
Out of nowhere. So, yeah, I don't know. Like, it is kind of interesting. Like, it's like, well, FMOD wasn't there, but Fabric 2 was there, and we're still saying WISE. Even though the reps are there. So it's interesting in the sense of where the middleware is going. Cryware was there, and Cryware's been there for a long. They've always seemed to come out for GameStoneCon often. I was happy to see them there too. So quite a lot of middleware love in a sense, but minus FMOD sadly not being there.
Yeah, minus FMOD. Although Matt Miller in the chat, hey Matt, how are you doing? He says he's been using FMOD more and more on his work, so that's cool. I like FMOD. I really enjoy my time with FMOD. Part of it is because I just know it really well, and I know all sorts of weird tricks, and I can work outside of the FMOD Studio editor app when needed.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not sure what this means for FMOD. What's his name? Oh, I am blanking on his name right now. He's. Do you know who I'm talking about? He's repped FMOD for such a long time in the.
Stephen Schultz.
Say it again.
Stephen Schultz.
Stephen Schultz. Yeah. So he recently left FMOD. And I don't know if it's just a simple matter of that, losing a person who I imagine must have been part of figuring out these relationships with various people and various companies like Game SoundCon not being there to maintain the relationship, or if it's pointing to something else.
I don't know. It's what do you think, Mike?
I was going to ask, was there just a WISE track and not the parallel FMOD track that's been there in prior years, or did they have some other tech track to compensate?
Yeah, well, Matt Miller actually mentions the VR stuff that was happening over at Game SoundCon. You might have missed FMOD, but it seemed like in its place, if you were interested in VR and AR stuff, there were a number of different sponsored sessions talking about VR audio. Some of it were more intro to VR audio. Some of it was a bit more math heavy. And it was still really quite cool. They were clearly sponsored sessions talking about their tech. I actually haven't really worked with any particular VR middleware solutions. I haven't had the opportunity to work on those projects. But I did check out some of those sessions. And they were really cool. They were really interesting. And it was really great to have Game SoundCon there and use that as an opportunity to stay up to date on what people care about when it comes to VR tech concerns. Yeah, there was VR. That was cool. WISE. I know I can't say WISE. It's WISE to me. Really? Am I the only one that you know who says WISE and not WISE? Mike? Chase?
Yeah, no, I say WISE.
I was only teasing.
Oh.
That's what Simon and Mike say. They say WISE, and I don't know. That's that's what they say. So I figured the CEOs would know better than I would. I didn't create it, so I was just teasing. It's all fun. They had a really cool shirt though. If you went, they had like a Death Star type of shirt with the company name spelling out the Death Star. So that was a really nice swag piece if you were at the con, and I hope you got one. And Steinberg was there, and with showing off Nuendo with some of their integration with the middleware as well.
Yeah.
And I actually got a really cool mug from them, so I was like really excited. I should be sipping tea like Mike is on the show with that one. Thank you, Steinberg. This is not sponsored by Steinberg, by the way.
I don't know. Maybe it could be if I got a mug. I missed out on that mug. Let's see. What else? So we had the VR track there. That's a relatively new addition. But we also had a couple of other tracks there. The Game Audio Research and Studies track, which was different from some of the stuff that I had seen previously. And maybe they have had stuff like this in the past, Chase, but I'm really surprised by this. I'm just going to say some of the titles of these things. So, aesthetic considerations and technical optimization for physics-based procedural sound synthesis in immersive environments. Okay, that sounds cool. That sounds interesting. That sounds really heady. I feel like that's the that's like a 50-page paper that I'm going to read, as opposed to something with some nice snappy PowerPoint action. Let's see. Some of them are actually even more heady, and in a weird way, alienation and continuation in the music of Metal Gear Solid. Folk dancing and radical politics, Far Cry 5's music as Western hymnody. So these are pieces that are actually presented by people who are actually not game audio professionals, but are instead coming into it as researchers, as more like musicologists. And I thought that was interesting. I had an opportunity to actually check out some of these sessions later in the day on day 2. So stuff like The Flow of Time, a study of Koji Kondo's loop point distortion techniques. I thought, okay, this is neat. This is cool. It's certainly something that I had thought about a little bit, and I feel like I had actually benefited from thinking about it for a little bit of time, but seeing that a person has devoted a significant amount of academic research time into this was really surprising to me, and that they're actually at this conference presenting to a somewhat sparsely populated room within this larger game sound conference for professionals. Chase, did you actually go to any of these sessions?
No, I did not. I hung out in the gold room all day. I knew better to to kind of get deep into those things. In fact, I submitted a talk last year to one of the game studies because most people might know, but I did a research analysis of the One-Winged Angel from Final Fantasy VII and broke it down through its form and all that. Yeah, so I actually submitted that talk, but it didn't get received, so it's all good. But that wasn't the reason why I didn't go. I just just wanted to kind of hang out and say hello to some friends, and it was actually quite fruitful. I was there from 6 in the morning to about 10 at night. It was a long day, but I did miss out, and I feel bad. Actually, since I remember you going a couple years ago, because they had the research track then, and they were talking about the CPU usage with certain AMD chips that would perform better with your sample libraries. Does this sound familiar? Do you remember us talking about this?
Oh yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah,
they did have that game audio research stuff there. I think the thing that I'm calling out here is specifically this game audio studies track that they had, which was, the game audio research track, they're done by either computer hardware or software or game developer professionals.
Right.
And then these guys who are from, let's see, Dana Plank, PhD, Eli Badra, Berklee College of Music, Mount St. Antonio College, Mount SAC, Cal Poly Pomona, and it's just really interesting seeing their perspectives. And I don't think that they've had this game audio studies track specifically. I know I had seen some game audio research stuff in the past, but this studies where you're looking at things like articulating the soundscape of the Super Nintendo era, style and technique in 1990s role-playing games. It's
Yeah.
really cool. I feel like there's definitely a part of my brain that's really that's really tingling after seeing that title. But
Yeah.
for me as a professional, I wonder, okay, do I really need this session? I don't know, Mike. You weren't at Game SoundCon, but what do you think about this particular track of stuff?
It sounds interesting on the face of it, and if you love a particular game genre, a particular game, to hear a scholarly analysis might be a lot of fun. Where I'm curious, and I guess no one here has actually attended any, so I'm not going to have any answers to this question, but I'm curious how to what extent these talks are doing the kind of analysis that really parallels how this music was written. Or are they creating layers of erudition that don't actually exist in the formulation of the music? Since as composers, we know that a given score is a mixture of kind of premeditation and just from the hip instinct and things we do desperately because the deadline is approaching. And media music is not always as well thought through or planned as concert music or music that comes out of academia. So I think it would be kind of funny if there was some score that was written very intuitively with an almost kind of pop songwriting mindset, then subject to this very thick analysis with lots of verbosity that's more construction than it is analysis. So that correspondence can vary wildly depending on, from game to game. I think something by Ubisoft probably does have a lot of research and premeditation in it and a lot of ethnomusical analysis. So to hear a scholarly discussion of that kind of score would be very interesting. On the other hand, as you go back in time to the more naive and intuitive early days of game music, it may really be more verbiage than is warranted by the creative processes involved. Speaking of verbiage, this was a very long answer to a simple question, but I hope that provided some insight.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. There were a couple of sessions that I did go to. That Super Nintendo era, articulating the soundscape of the Super Nintendo era. That was actually kind of interesting. They did a little bit of, no, I shouldn't say a little bit of research. I don't know exactly how much research they did, but they did present some of the process that they went through of basically matching up sample libraries that they found, the stuff that was commercially available in that era, with the sounds that were actually present on the Super Nintendo, being like, okay, if you take this Korg sample and you go through the process of resampling and then going through the 4-bit add PCM compression, you get this. And I thought, they did some things like that were interesting, and they were able to try to find some of these sources. But yeah, there was also a lot of speculation that was there as well as to why certain things were happening. And I would have liked some of that perspective, being able to talk to someone that was right there who could actually shed light on the process or the lack of process, as you say, with some of these things, not just being games, but being these productions that are going to be under constant pressure to finish. We just need to get some asset done in the game, right?
I think the best analysis is going to come from someone who is steeped in the realities of the production of game music or game sound design, because a strictly top-down academic approach, I think, is going to miss a lot of the reality behind the construction of these media, which is why the example you gave of talking about the limitations, the technical limitations of the Super Nintendo, was it?
Yes.
And how that drove artistic decisions. I think that's amazing. That kind of study, I think, is really interesting, because in game audio, especially, art is a function of the technology that is practical to use at a given point in history. And those kind of interrelationships, I think, are really interesting.
Agreed. Yeah. I kind of want to go back to what you were talking about, Chase, about hanging out in the gold room for most of Game SoundCon. I actually feel like I got a lot out of Game SoundCon from the sessions. There were some good sessions, especially the VR stuff, because that was there to fill in some holes in my knowledge that I had and really wanted to plug up really quickly, and it gave me some ideas for how to keep on moving when it came to building up that part of my virtuosity. But I would say that actually a lot of my favorite parts actually came in the gold room. A lot of offhand comments here and there. I just wanted to share one of the things that I thought was the best for me was when there were a bunch of people that were hanging out around the piano. And at the piano was Will Roget, the composer for Mortal Kombat 11 and Call of Duty World War II and a bunch of other stuff. He'd actually given a keynote the night before, and that keynote was great. More than that, I happened to catch like a little fragment of conversation where he was mentioning to someone about Mortal Kombat 11, something with some brass voicing, some brass chords. And I couldn't hear all of it, but towards the end, he mentioned, oh yeah, Basil Polidorus' score for Conan the Barbarian. I was like, oh, right. That is what's going on right there in those cinematics. Yeah, that is totally Conan right there. Haha. And then I just started rethinking some of the cinematics that I had heard, and realizing, oh, I should go back and listen to this again. So I've been listening to some Conan again, and Hunt for Red October, some more of those scores. So just that little offhand comments that I got in the gold room sent me off in this spiral of re-education of stuff that I had heard many, many years ago, and relearning some new stuff out of that. So yeah, just hanging out in the gold room over at Game SoundCon is really great.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, like I said, I've done it before, and this year I decided to kind of just, like I said, do it again. And I hung out at the Gigantic booth. I caught up with them. Materia Collective had a booth there. Caught up with Sebastian and Emmanuel Agumbai. Caught up with people from, like I said, Nuendo, Steinberg, Wise. Had an appointment with Sugi. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but that's like this new sound design tool that is actually like really, really, really interesting and very fast and mostly intuitive and powerful, and got like a little meeting there. And then, like I said, like just running into people was just like a chain link web almost. Just like, okay, well, you're done here, you catch up there, you catch up here, or this person knows that person, this person knows this person. You sit at one table, then other people gather, you switch tables, you stand over here, you get some ice cream, you have some tea. It helps to at least have your social skills up. So, and to be hydrated and to be fresh. And so I didn't go to the session, so it was pretty much fresh all day.
Yeah.
And so therefore it allowed me to kind of just like, when the sessions were all in session, you can kind of catch, like you were saying, the side conversations. And it's an overflow for the speakers. Like if there's an overflow room, usually at GDC, they go to this other room on the side, but that's just like its room itself. But the gold room is actually like where the speakers and the attendees, there's no barrier. That's just, if you want to talk to someone, you didn't catch them after the session, it was a long line. If they happen to be the right timing, you can just start up a conversation there and hop right into wherever you wanted to. And it's just amazing. It's an amazing place to just hang out.
Yeah, it's great. And yeah, it's so good to keep yourself fresh and receptive to anything that can happen, because a lot of stuff happens with all those people, with all those companies. You mentioned Sugi. It's really cool what those guys are doing with those tools. I had a chance to play a little bit with GameSynth. Wacky program, but just playing around with a pen and drawing sound effects in this cool way. Like, oh man, that's fun. It's, I guess for me, since I guess I'm a mix of a musician, sound designer, and I tend to be more musician. So I find myself generally more inspired when someone shows a musical tool. But Game Synth has this performative element to the editor that really fires my synapses and gets me inspired to do different types of abstract sound design. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
Wacky company, cool company. It's this French dude that's somewhere in the not the boonies, but like really in the far countryside in Japan. Not a Tokyo or Kyoto or any of those cities that you may know of. But
Not Shikoku either.
no, it's but yeah, really cool stuff. So yeah, it's nice to see those cool tools and be inspired by what the tech is that people are making for this.
Absolutely.
Has there been any cool tech on the horizons for you guys? Anything that you're really excited to check out? Or I'm kind of wondering because it's almost time for Black Friday season. I'm wondering, should I buy something? Is anything really exciting me right now? There's a couple things here and there, but
tech-wise, Mike, I think you had something about Logic, right?
Oh yeah, this is old news because it occurred during our hiatus. But one thing worth mentioning on the Logic side is, I think in the last major dot update, the single dot update, there was a feature added where you can instantiate a instrument. I'm going to be as specific as I can about this. An instrument track, and then have it be effectively inactive, so that the specifications for the plugin and the channel strip are all intact, but they're in this state where they're not actually loading any data. So it's almost a placeholder that looks like you're all intact, but they're until you activate the track by clicking on it or recording with it, the track will not use any memory or a modicum of memory needed to put the placeholder there. And what's cool about this is, at least for me, is the application towards template building. Because you can instantiate a huge template and have it essentially have no memory cost or minimal memory cost and minimal load time cost. And those two things are my problems with templates that are instantiated in your DAW. Because if you have a huge orchestra and a template, you're loading that whole orchestra whether or not you're using it. So this, to me, makes templates really interesting in Logic. It allows you to be very ambitious and yet not have to pay the price. One thing I've been experimenting with is adding instruments to a template and then hiding those tracks. So it's almost like they're not there until I hit H, which is my hotkey for show everything that's hidden. And suddenly this massive palette of sounds opens up and I can just pick the ones I need. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. You get a visual representation of your entire palette and the feeling that any of those instruments are there as soon as you need them, but your template loads about as fast as an empty sequence. I forget the terminology for this kind of track, and Logic has a kind of confusing hierarchy of different states a track can be in. I forget if it's called like inactive instruments or whatever. But logicians will know what I'm talking about. It's a really cool and very significant feature that did not receive a whole lot of attention from Apple. So that I'm looking forward to really digging into that possibility and bringing more templates into my workflow.
Yeah, that sounds
That's
cool.
awesome.
I've been struggling with how to deal with templates, honestly. As far as I could tell, well, the way that I've been generally treating them is, here is my big monolithic template, and I have that loaded on a separate Vienna Ensemble Pro server at the beginning of the day, and I don't touch it. And because it's at least loaded up there on that machine that is separate from my DAW machine, then my DAW is reasonably responsive. But still, there's that issue of how, being able to have to adjust that and add and subtract and deal with activating these things. It's monolithic. It's hard to edit. I have to go and network into that computer if I want to actually make some significant changes. So I'm still struggling with that. And I actually thought a year back when I went on this path that this would be the thing that solved all of my workflow issues that I was coming across, and rather it's actually opened up a whole other can of worms for me, and I want something better. And what you're describing actually sounds like exactly the something better that I want.
Feeling the temptation of Logic now?
It's not just the temptation of Logic, it's the temptation of the Mac, because I do use Macs, but only for projects. And Chase is shaking his head, and no, I'm a Windows guy. I like Reaper. I love Reaper. And wait a minute, Matt in the chat is actually saying the verboten question. What DAW are you using? We didn't start it. I'll just say yes, I use Reaper. Chase, you're on Cubase, right?
I'm on Cubase. That's why the guys gave me a mug.
Yeah.
I'm loyal.
Oh no, Cubase is great. I love what I've seen about Nuendo Wise integration too. It's just.
It's pretty powerful. What Mike is talking about for me is that if I was to build an orchestral template and I didn't want to use maybe I didn't want to use a couple pieces from like the horn section or the woodwind, all I have to do is just press shift and left click, and it freezes that instance of contact, and then therefore it's not being used. And then obviously, hopefully, if I'm remembering like, oh, why isn't this working? I'll first think, oh, well, I probably have it frozen, so it's not using any type of very little memory or CPU power, and then going from there. But obviously it depends on how vast your template is. If it's 100 tracks versus which is something I kind of get close to if I was to do that. But again, like it's not too hard to find. It's just, especially when it's in folders and it's colored. And if you know, I'm like, oh, I have this many flutes, I want to add one more. So I just kind of make all of them first, and then I just start little by little. And if I need more, then I'll activate it into it so that I'm not using more than I need.
What DAW is that?
Cubase.
It sounds like historically Logic has rarely been on the forefront of any new technology. Usually they implement their own version of something that's been out there for a while, and sometimes they do it a little more cleanly and prettily or ergonomically. So I wouldn't be surprised if Cubase came out with this idea first. And
this is Cubase 8 I'm using, by the way, because they're on Cubase 10. So 8 is old. So if Logic just came out with this and they're on Cubase 10, and yeah, they're just now catching up probably.
And Logic
it may work differently.
Logic just introduced their version of expression maps, which are articulation sets. And Cubase has been doing that for years. So I mean like within the last year. And it's great to have that technology, but I think this is speculation territory, but I think when developers are really comfortable, they don't feel the pressure to innovate as fiercely as when their livelihood is contingent on attracting a user base and retaining them. And ever since Apple bought Logic, I speculate that those guys are more comfortable than they were when they were just a free-floating entity. And even though Logic's a great tool, and it's just gone better by leaps and bounds since Apple took over, you don't get the sense that they're really like slamming the accelerator to be on the forefront of innovation. And I wouldn't be surprised if other companies tend to move forward more quickly, and Logic kind of moves along it keeps pace at a stately rate, and always implementing features well, but not as fast as the other companies.
It's funny you mentioned that, because what is your favorite notation software, Mike?
Oh yeah, well that's a perfect example. I love, or is that a perfect counter example? The answer to your question is Dorico, of course, and we've talked about Dorico and its relationship to the now ossified Sibelius for many years. And you could say, well, is that going to happen to Dorico? And I think the Dorico is a special case because I think the creators of that software, who are, of course, the original creators of Sibelius, are very ideologically driven. They really want to make the best possible notation software. They are overeducated. They know so much about engraving and the history. And just like when they started out with Sibelius, they said, we want to make the best thing ever. And we've talked about how Dorico, the dismissal of the core Sibelius team from Sibelius was this blessing in disguise because it forced them to start over. Now, if, let's say, history repeated itself and the Dorico team was kicked out of Steinberg, I'm sure we would be able to hear the screams from over here. But if that were to happen, then I would suspect that whoever took over Dorico, if they didn't have that same kind of we want to make the best thing ever drive, might then sink into the same stagnant, slow creep forward that Sibelius is now doing. May that never happen. Please let Dorico continue in its blazing pace and its current rate, because it's really a great time to be a Dorico user.
Yeah. I mean, Dorico, it's certainly captured a lot of hearts and minds recently, but it's also certainly third place just because Finale and Sibelius are so well entrenched in the whole industry. It's going to take a long time, honestly. I don't think we will see Dorico at the top of the leaderboard in terms of support and users and like larger music companies actually, working with Dorico as their first program. If you're going to a company that needs to do cleanup and parts prep for whatever services that you've got, they're going to be Finale, Sibelius, and maybe there will be someone on staff that actually can do some Dorico stuff. But the fact that they are in third place means that I think they're going to continue this upward trajectory that's been so great to watch over the last few years.
A long-term trajectory that Dorico seems to be edging along is integration with Cubase. And first stage of that was adopting a kind of stripped-down version of expression maps within Dorico. As I understand it, Dorico uses kind of a subset of Cubase's expression map technology, and not everything is implemented, and it's a little bit Wild West right now where pieces aren't really working. But you can do quite a bit with Dorico expression maps, and I've been experimenting with programming that way. And I think as time goes on, you can kind of intuit when you look at the play screen in Dorico and how it kind of looks like a sequencer. And it's a piano bar roll display, and you can edit controller data in a way that looks very familiar to most sequencer users. And obviously, Dorico is now overseen by the same company that makes Cubase. And Cubase, of course, wants to find ways to differentiate itself from Logic and the rest of the competition. So I would not be surprised to see within a couple of years tighter integration of those two. And if they can pull it off, if they can really make some kind of seamless experience where you do the sequencery stuff in Cubase and you do the notation-y stuff in Dorico, and the two are essentially working on the same composition at the same time, you will have an amazing and unprecedented suite. And that is the kind of thing that could pull me over from Logic to Cubase if they do that well enough. And
well, that's why I brought it up in the first place, is because I've been hearing from most of the Cubase community from my end and within our community of game audio and we see this when you're at GDC, when they're at GameSoundCon, when they're at NAMM, those three places that I've seen where if you talk to them, you get to know the reps, you get to, see Daniel, you get to see Greg, you get to see, the other guys, and then become a little bit more familiar, and they want the feedback. They know that we drive the business. And so they want our business, so they listen to us. And I've seen and heard, it's like, hey, they finally updated. They heard from me. There was a couple people that had also complained about the same thing, but it wasn't beating a dead horse type of complaints where there's nothing happens. It was just like within half of the year, of update of this, and they fix stuff. And so they are on it on both ends, where it's the Dorico side, where it's the Nuendo side, where it's the Cubase side. They are for their customers and that's why it's such a good relationship, and that's why they show up to those things, because they do want to know and they do want to be involved. And so I definitely do see them growing and getting to that next step and separating themselves from their competition is because they listen.
I think that Dork is ultimately going to ascend because of merit, because they really are thinking through every aspect of notation. By the way, no, they're not our sponsor, but they are thinking through every aspect of notation and imagining how they could implement each idea as flexibly and as powerfully as possible. And they have the advantage, again, of not just their own knowledge, but the experience of having done it once and being able to do it again from scratch. So generally, everything in Dorico tends to be a little harder to learn than Sibelius, but much more flexible, because they can think through all the use cases and say, oh, like you may want to be able to do this, but sometimes you want to do this. And we found that we couldn't quite do this in Sibelius, so now we're going to rethink this feature to make it easy. And I think people are going to realize that it's just almost always a better way to do things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right now, I got to admit, I'm sort of fighting with flexibility because, as I mentioned before, I use Reaper. And Reaper, you can do pretty much anything, but there really isn't an ideal, perfect, well-established way to do any given thing. Like I look on YouTube and I see things about this is the way to do things if you've got Cubase and Vienna Ensemble Pro, and everyone generally agrees that, yeah, okay, yeah, that is in fact the way to do things. I'm doing things in Reaper, which is, a little bit different, and then I'm trying to get it with something that is kind of an industry standard type of thing, not really an industry standard, but a lot of people recognize and use it, Vienna Ensemble Pro, and I realize, oh, I can connect in that way. Okay, there's a difference between using this event listener plugin versus using VST3i, and then instantiating the Reaper buses this way, and then how exactly do I deal with VST3 MIDI buses? Okay, I can have up to 8 buses, and there isn't a clear way, but I'm thankful for that flexibility. But I got to admit, I actually have this anxiety of not doing things the right or proper way, that goes with everything. It's how do I have my orchestral templates set up? How am I exactly dealing with my gain staging here and all this stuff? But this is actually something that I'm trying to work on. I'm trying to attack it head on by actually being kind of public about how I've been doing things recently. Have you guys heard of Noisevember? Are you doing anything for Noisevember?
I have not heard of this, but I can always start.
It is a hashtag. Hashtag Noisevember, and both sound designers and music composers on Twitter and social media have been doing things. You can even find it on Instagram, people just doing some small movies of bits of sound design that they're doing, or little small pieces of music. I've been seeing a couple of game music composers actually tweet out things like, oh, here's a 15-second piece of music that I've done for my cat, things like that, which is really cute. I've decided I'm going to attack Noisevember head on, and I gave myself this project of orchestrating an old mid-90s Japanese FM synth soundtrack, a relatively obscure one called Yuno, which was done by this composer who I actually hold in quite high regard, Umemoto Ryu, who unfortunately died in 2011, but I think his synth work in the 90s and 2000s is absolutely stellar. And I figure, hey, that's actually interesting. It would be interesting to try listening and analyzing this synth soundtrack and orchestrating it. So over the last few days, since November 1st, I've been streaming every day, listening, analyzing, and then rewriting, orchestrating tracks from this game. And it's been fun and kind of scary, because now people all over the world can be like, oh, this is how I actually write a track. I hope it's the right way to do it. And kind of getting over those inhibitions and saying, well, I just need to get this done because I actually like this music and I want to see if I can put this thing out there and write this piece and hopefully give some entertainment value to people, give a little bit of education to people who haven't heard of this music composer before. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do right now. And I think it's kind of fun. I had never really done any of these monthly things. My wife, who's an artist, she did Inktober last month. I know a lot of people this month that are doing things like NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month. But this is actually my first time doing something like this.
Sounds awesome. I'm curious, is this the composer that did, and I might butcher the name, Escaluda?
Oh, Escaluda. Yes, the shooter.
Yeah. Is this the same composer?
I believe it is.
Yes,
he did.
Yeah, I love that composer.
Yeah, yeah, he's a really interesting composer, and unfortunately, he died very young. You know, he was only.
I read that Gama Sutra.
Yeah,
that's how I found out.
Yeah, that's right. There was a retrospective on his works on Gama Sutra a couple years back, and you know, because he did things that were very much Japanese. He only worked with these Japanese developers and publishers, and he's most famous for things like graphic adventure and visual novels in the mid 90s. And of course, that genre is much more popular now than it was before. But, you know, he died in 2011 before we recognized the possibility of that genre in America and the West. So a lot of his most famous works, a lot of people don't really know them. And then later on in his life, he became audio director for this company, Cave. And Cave is very, they make a lot of bullet hell shooters. Again, not exactly the most popular genre here in America, but wonderful soundtracks, wonderful, intricate, very detail-oriented, intricate synth work that he does in all those soundtracks. And I figure, hey, that would be a fun challenge, doing something like that, trying to orchestrate something like that.
That's great. That's fantastic.
Are you literally recreating some of the cues from scratch based on just listening to them just by ear?
That is what I'm doing right now, and I'm actually kind of ashamed at how slowly I've been going through it. So I think I spent about 2 to 3 hours just listening and being like, okay, I think that this pad is doing this. I mean, it's relatively quick for me to just go and say, okay, this is the basic harmony. Okay, major sevens, minor sevens. He's doing a Neapolitan here, bam. But really listening in and actually trying to repeat sections and saying, okay, yeah, I think he is actually expanding the chord out to a 6-note chord instead of a 5-note chord here, and stuff like that. It's really been a workout for my ear, which I need. Honestly, I think my ear is kind of the weakest part of my whole my musician's body. My hands are pretty good when it comes to just like make stuff happen, but my ear, is that really that instrument? Is that really that note? It's a real workout for me.
It's interesting because just before I moved in September and October, I put on a video game radio, and to do exercises just to kind of get some composition ideas. I put it on the radio, so the radio plays at random, and I'd sit at the piano and I'd do a quick analysis on the notepad just by listening to it, and I'd write down what my ears were hearing for the chords. And then by like the second time, it because video game music normally loops, it has like different parts and the form isn't so abstract as the way I write. It was easier to kind of discern where the chords are and then figure it out. And then I try to write, what key is it in? And then if it's in a mode, and then from there, maybe figure out the melody, all within one listen of the song, so the song does not repeat. So by the time the next track comes on the radio, I'm into a different song, I'm into a different key, I'm trying to figure out the tempo, I'm trying to figure out the chord progression still. And it was actually really fun. And I did like 10 minutes. I did 10 minutes of that. And I was like, man, this is really cool. So I have those notes. I'll probably have to share those with you. But I thought that would be really cool to kind of continue. So yeah, that's awesome that you're like taking it a lot step further and just choosing one and then saying, I'm going to redo this way in this style, and keeping yourself honest by streaming and putting it forward to kind of have something done hopefully by the end of the month. That's really awesome.
Yeah. Matt in the chat is asking, what am I using for an FM synth? I'm not using an FM synth. So the point of this whole exercise is I really like Umemoto, and I think his music is really interesting and intricate and well written. But the fact that it's actually presented in this FM synth way is, well, I mean, I like it, and it's been redone actually in different types of FM synth soundtracks. It's a really interesting history to this game. So the game is called Uno, and it originally came out in 96, 97 for PC. And the soundtrack never actually got an official release. But then the game was remade for the Sega Saturn. And they didn't port over the soundtrack exactly. What they did was they just redid the soundtrack, and actually totally different composers were responsible for that soundtrack. They ended up remaking it, and many things actually sound a little bit different, or even rather more different than you would expect if you were familiar with the original source material. It actually ended up happening that there was an anime based on this game that came out just this last year. And again, a recreation of the original soundtrack. So I figured, what if I go back to the original soundtrack, this original PC-98, this Japanese-only PC platform, and its FM synth capabilities, very much like an ad-lib sound card. And from that, orchestrate. All right, we got this lead. Oh, it has this quality to it. I think it makes sense to do oboe versus clarinet. Oh, okay, that makes sense. Actually, maybe it's more like oboe versus English horn. Yeah, it sounds like he wants to do that the way that that the timbre of these two counter melodies things are going. Or maybe it should be more like oboe versus flute. And just, okay, I'm going through these tracks and listening and making those decisions because it's already had so many different FM synth soundtracks, and I've wanted to do more orchestral stuff and also show how orchestration can reveal a different side to this intricate FM synth writing that he's done. So that's my plan for this month.
That sounds really interesting, and both an artistic tribute to a composer whose work you admire, and a sort of self-improvement opportunity at the same time. So that's a pretty cool project.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. So far, the energy has allowed me to keep on going for about an hour or so every day for the last 4 days. Just got 26 more days to go.
You can do it.
Yeah.
You can do it.
People want to voyeuristically join you on this trek. Where can they find you?
So I am on Twitch. So twitch.tv/Sklathill. Some of you might remember Sklathill as the name that I used to have on my Twitter, but I had actually long since changed my Twitter name to my real name, Vincent Diamante, on Twitter. And I will actually tweet out whenever I am Twitch streaming. So you can go and check that out and check out my channel. I also plan to be very regular about my Twitch streaming during this entire month. So it's always going to be in the morning, typically starting somewhere between 7 and 9 a.m. and going for about an hour or maybe longer than that, depending on how things go and how much work is on my plate for the day.
And Chase, I've seen you do some stuff on Twitch as well, perhaps more occasion-based. Are you doing anything on a recurring basis as well?
Yeah, so since I've moved, I am resetting up the internet because everything is almost good in the house except for that. And for video, as you can see, is not the best. So I want to make sure that the stream is as copacetic as it can be, and then I'm back up and running. So I am twitch.tv/gamercomposer, And the projects, I'll probably be streaming some leftover sound design that I was doing before, and probably introducing something that, like I said, Vince was showing, but like my idea with the radio stuff, and teasing a little bit of a couple of new projects that are of my own album without a game attached to it that I'll be introducing as well. So bringing in musicians, showing how we collaborate, things of that nature. I got a nice little list of things I want to kind of take care of, but it should be back up and running this month. I did promise that.
That is great. I have to admit, I've actually been very inspired by all the streaming that you've been doing the last few months, and it's been great. I love seeing your process and working, whether it be just in the DAW or especially when you have the game up and running and you're just putting stuff in there and trying things out right there on the fly.
That's actually been a lot of fun. First of all, thank you for watching, and I'm humbled to hear that you've been inspired. It's just something that I just thought I'd continue to just try out and keep going. It's kept me honest to kind of get through the last work months that it was for the game, and try things that way. And I enjoy implementation, and it's really good to see the results happen in real time. And I'm glad that other people enjoy watching it as well.
I think, one of the reasons that I went on this path is that I want to be able to show stuff that I've been doing or stuff that's on my mind. And that's, Twitch is a really nice platform for that. But of course, there's all sorts of other ways to do it. Like, Mike, I see so much cool news from you on your social media. And there's actually a lot that you've done over the last year, and I think it would be worthwhile to actually mention some more of that.
Well, generally, I think social media is good when you're too self-conscious to make videos of yourself, like I am, and I try to curate a little bit. I go light on the, I just got a new plugin, isn't this cool? I occasionally indulge in that, but most of the time I try to curate it so that it's interesting. The content has to be interesting to someone who's not me. That's my guiding principle. And that's something I suggest really for any freelancer, anyone who's creating their own brand. And this is a topic we don't need to, give the 2-minute version of, because it's so heavily discussed. But that's been my MO for sharing so far. And I haven't dipped my toes into the waters of video, probably for the dumb reason that I just don't happen to have a webcam on my studio computer. I just have it on this laptop. That's not really a reason so much as an excuse. So who knows? Maybe I'll catch inspiration from you two and be the next person to be go into the video self-documentary trend.
Well, I actually kind of want to cycle back a little bit, because we were talking about Game SoundCon, and that makes me really think about who it is that we are marketing to. So Game SoundCon is, of course, professionals, a lot of professionals, and never mind what I was talking about with academics talking about various things. And I was wondering about, how much interest there is from the professional crowd for that. I think there is some, but for the most part, they're working game audio professionals. And then you have all these various platforms that people engage with Twitch and Twitter and Facebook. And it makes me wonder sometimes what is really the best way to go about doing things. For me, I've always found it best to actually just talk with professionals directly. So Game SoundCon was great. I was talking to other audio professionals, and I really don't have very much of a public presence out there for people or fans to actually look at my stuff. I have a really horrible website at vincentdiamante.com, which is just I think maybe 30 black words on an orange background. It's absolutely horrible. I think anyone that was in social media or public relations would think that I'm just doing the most awful job ever.
I think you did,
but I've been able to survive. But it's, man, I realize actually we're coming up on an hour though. And it just makes me think about this larger question. of who it is that we think of whenever we're sort of putting stuff out there. You know, now that I've went on this Twitch path, you know, who am I talking to with Twitch versus Mike, who you're talking to when you make your updates on your Facebook or on Twitter or Instagram, and Chase with your Twitch stream. You know, it's something that I'm still not sure if I'm doing the right thing. Again, similar to me and Reaper. Like, am I doing the right thing? Is this the way to actually do things if I'm going to be a working game audio composer, not just now, but in the future? But I don't know.
Might be an interesting topic for next time.
For next time.
More life.
Next time.
Yep.
So until next time, we talk about what we're playing now, right?
Oh yeah.
Things
right.
haven't changed.
What are we playing now? Chase, you probably have been playing some games recently.
Yeah, I got my girlfriend until dawn, and it's been a blast scaring the bejesus out of her. We're playing it together, so it's quite the experience. But that's currently the only thing that I have enough time for, unfortunately. And this Friday's my birthday, and on my birthday, Death Stranding's coming out, so I will be playing that.
Ah, nice. Hideo Kojima at his best. Who knows? I've read a couple of reviews. It seems like people are divided on it. The people who love it. But I'm looking forward to it regardless. Mike, are you playing any games? I'm not
seeing anything. I'm not hearing anything.
Embarrassingly, I'm not. I've been too busy working, and my recreation has leaned more towards Netflix in the last couple of months because I don't want to do anything interactive during my breaks. I just want to lie passively and absorb somebody else's artistic vision. So,
wait, you don't want to play Bandersnatch on Netflix? How dare you?
It's true. There are some cases. So other than the occasional like retro game, I've been lax, and I really have to get back aboard because a game composer must stay familiar with the state of the art, if nothing else. So this is a good opportunity for me to shame myself into being better in future weeks.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I mean, I haven't been playing too many games myself, except one. My wife was really excited about Untitled Goose Game. So we played Untitled Goose Game, and it was great. And I have to admit that I didn't beat it myself. I watched my wife beat it. And when I wasn't watching my wife beat it, I watched her, I listened to her from upstairs shouting at the TV, mimicking the cries of the goose. Honk, honk, honk. Just tormenting all the villagers and screaming at them when they were taking things away from the goose. All to the gentle, the wonderful Debussy that is present throughout the entire soundtrack. So there's that.
Fantastic. Hope he's getting a check.
Yeah.
Sounds amazing.
Yep. Quite a game. So a little bit of fun there in the game playing world. In the chat, Matt was saying, anecdotally, I hear Instagram is the place du jour to have a presence. I've been hearing that too. I've seen more and more composers, indie game composers and music people basically putting these snippets of music on their Instagram, and you could, hit it, listen to it. All right, that's cool. Maybe we will talk a little bit more about our own social media presence and the way that composers treat social media the next time on Game
It's a good topic, actually. You could do that.
Yes. So you can find us over here on YouTube. Also on our website, gameaudiohour.com. We do have a Facebook, facebook.com/gameaudiohour, and on Twitter. We're very thankful for all the people that have kept us in mind during our long hiatus. Thank you, and thank you for watching. Mike, Chase, it was a pleasure bring the gang back together.
Indeed. Yeah. And hopefully we'll see more of the gang in future installments as well.
Yes. All right. Bye.
Bye.